All right, guys. Have Gerald from Pop Culture Cosmos here. We're going to be talking a little WWE, wrestling in general, talking movies, TV in about a year or two. Gerald, how have you been? It's been a little bit.
It has been a little bit. I'm doing all right. Hope everyone out there is doing the same. I know times are tough right now. 2020 has not been the best year. In fact, it's been a pretty tough year, but I'm doing okay, and I feel very blessed under the circumstances.
Yeah, I'd say I'd have to agree. Definitely would have to agree. Luckily, I've been back to work lately, so that's always a plus.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So, Gerald, we're talking a little bit of wrestling today.
Mm-hmm.
We've been keeping up with WWE lately.
You could say that. For the stuff I do for the Pop Culture Cosmos, around every big card, what we do is we make sure we have a preview. And of course, on our site, we post the big results from all the pay-per-views on our Facebook page, Pop Culture Cosmos. So I follow there. Plus, as an avid, fan of the Wrestling Observer, way back, even dating back to the 80s when I first discovered it via the National Sports Newsletter, daily newsletter that was out there. And then I saw that on a segment on one of the days a week, and I like, I wanted to know more because, I already knew about what professional wrestling, aka sports entertainment, was. So I wanted to always find out more about the inside. So I tried to go ahead and keep up every single day with the industry as part of the things I do for the Pop Culture Cosmos.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff, especially over the past year with new promotion moving in AEW. That's All Elite Wrestling for those of you watching who don't know what AEW is. It definitely caused WWE to change a lot of the ways they do things.
That's correct, absolutely. They were very complacent, which can happen. I mean, when you don't have any real competition for quite some time. And there were a lot of smaller entities, Ring of Honor, Impact / TNA, New Japan, just all trying to see if they can go ahead and make a foray into the U.S. market and make a big splash with varying limits of success. And it wasn't really until we saw this iteration of All Elite Wrestling, which emanated out of the Bullet Club, if people remember that, or they've gone by a Hot Topic and bought the shirt. But that emanated from that popularity from that group in Japan, and they were able to go ahead and basically convince Tony Khan and his father, who owned the Jacksonville Jaguars, to go ahead and invest in a promotion. And so far, they've had some ups and downs, and people will say about the quality level of the roster, quality level of the matches, some of the storylines, this and that. The same kind of criticisms you would give the WWE. But you know what? You can't fault them. They've got a 3-year contract that was extended by TNT. They're averaging somewhere in the neighborhood of 900,000 viewers, which was down from the 1.6 million, I think, that they debuted with. But there is a level of interest there because they had the successful pay-per-views beforehand. They were down earlier before when they had the NXT competition on Wednesday nights, but they're back up overall month after month from what they were doing earlier this year. So 900,000 viewers, closing in on 1 million. I think that's to be complimented on. They have a following that may be tired of what the WWE represents to them. So I'm happy for the success. I mean, I could nitpick on AEW with certain things. I'm not going to go all Jim Cornette on them because there are some good aspects of All Elite Wrestling. And I know Jim Cornette is an avid critic, hardline critic against them and everything they stand for. But I wish them success because it makes the wrestling, aka sports entertainment landscape, more viable for the wrestlers and also the fans themselves.
Oh yeah, definitely add some competition in terms of these wrestlers, entertainers making more money, actually having somewhere else to go that will offer them the same type of contracts, if you will. I know WWE hires as independent contractors. I don't know if that's changed yet. Some
No, because they would have to go ahead and issue things like health benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that they're conveniently trying to avoid at this point in time. And until they unionize, I don't think that the wrestlers will ever get that part of it taken care of. But then again, a lot of them are compensated enough to go ahead and get their own plans. As let's say, since there are independent contractors, they can go ahead accordingly. A lot of them, but it still leaves a lot as far as independent wrestlers and other wrestlers that are not unionized, that are not in the WWE, and that don't make that kind of cash. That leaves them without certain necessities that you and I take for granted.
Yeah, and if I read correctly, I believe this past week's episode of Dynamite was their largest audience. It's their take-home episode before, is it All Out or All In? One of the two. But it was the high, I think, 960,000 people, so somewhere in that realm tuned in. It was their highest rating of the year so far. They were in the top 15, I think, on television that night.
That's a great sign. Absolutely. I mean, they have peaks where it's closing in on 1 million once again, and they'd love to recapture that audience that was initially interested to see what they had to offer. Because, like I said, they debuted with a 1.6 million, I think, was the number, if I remember. So, it's very fascinating to see what they're doing. And again, there's some stuff that clicks, some stuff that doesn't. But I will say that they are doing some things well. Like, for instance, they're promoting some of the previously unknown talent or young talent and mixing it in with more familiar established names. Some of the names I wouldn't, some of the names I would push, some of the names I wouldn't. But be that as it may, I mean, they're just trying to go ahead and create their own niche while not going ahead and just rehashing all these other ex-WWE stars.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of criticism they've been getting is from bringing in a bunch of the larger names that were in WWE, which kind of brings me on something I want to touch on. Brock Lesnar. Do you think he's going to end up in AEW, or do you think he's going to use them as a means of getting more money out of WWE, or do you think he's going to end up going back to UFC?
Well, remember, he also has not only with AEW as a bargaining chip, UFC as a bargaining chip, but what's the other major one that Scott Coker owns? The other mixed martial arts that Scott Coker owns. I forget
what's familiar, but I know what you're talking about.
The one, yeah, because I know he's been asking in the media lately to see if he can arrange a fight with Fedor. Yes,
I actually read today.
Yeah. So he has been talking about that because he's under contract with Scott Coker's company. So that's also a possibility. But the thing is, in an environment right now when your numbers are only slightly up over the past couple months, and it's been pretty much a rough ride for the WWE as far as trying to stay right around 2 million viewers, because one show seems to be just barely over, one show just seems to be barely under, and I'm not sure if Fox and NBC Universal are happy with either of those numbers when it comes to Raw and SmackDown. So if that's the case, and that's with Lesnar at various points of time during the year, why do you need him? He's not going to bring in any more viewers at this point in time. Really, he might get a small bump here and there, but you pay him a large amount for very few appearances, and right now you would be doing it under the pretense of not having any crowd. So yeah, that's something that he brings would bring is a live audience, and you don't have a live audience to bring in. You maybe get small bumps in ratings, but you're always playing by his rules. And right now, I don't see the WWE bringing him back in just because of that. And that's why you see what Paul Heyman's doing and with Roman Reigns is because, hey, we got to go ahead and give Paul Heyman, even though he's no longer a huge part of the creative scene, you want to give him still something important to do. And that's why I think the Roman Reigns deal was made, and why I don't think they're going to go back to Brock Lesnar anytime soon. Although once live crowds appear, and if he's still a free agent, that could be a different story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'd be a good fit in AEW just because of the way he likes things done. He wants things done his way. I mean,
I mean,
there's nothing wrong with that. But the point is he's like one UFC fight away from a $25 million fight.
well, you look at the right now the landscape of AEW. Who is the champion? That would be John Moxley.
Yeah.
And what did John Moxley do in WWE when he fought or wrestled against Brock Lesnar? He got destroyed. So it's not a good look for your company if you bring in the guy that destroyed your champion, and millions and millions of people, and all your wrestling fans who are very knowledgeable about that, because it's not like they weren't watching WWE before. They were, when John Moxley was getting destroyed in 5 minutes by Brock Lesnar. It would not be a good move for them. I think they are going about that top level championship scenario right now with MJF. I think MJF, I'd like to see him get in a little better shape, but I other than that, I think that the comparisons to a young Roddy Piper are very much on spot on, and I think the future is with him, as much as he loves to say it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Is it too soon to go ahead and take the belt off of John Moxley? Maybe, but go ahead. You're saying
MJF is God. He's phenomenal on the mic. Absolutely phenomenal. He's gold.
He is phenomenal on the mic. He is the best thing about All Elite Wrestling. I mean, again, there are some big hits and misses in AEW, but again, you're going off of a talent pool that's less than what you have because of what WWE can take. WWE has all the benefit of being able to go ahead and take the best from professional wrestling, and then AEW gets everything else. And if that's the case, MJF was someone that fell through the cracks or developed at the right time for AEW. And look at him now. He is, again, one of the best finds for AEW, and he's proving it. The thing is, though, if you're going to stick the belt on him now, you're going to stick the belt on him for a long time. And if you don't, if you don't, well, I'm just going to say this. I apologize. If you don't, you've wasted your entire investment in him. But I can really see AEW doing some smart things, and what they are doing is they're building it. They built him up slowly. They put him in a program with Cody Rhodes. They had him go over on Cody Rhodes, which was the smart thing to do. And Cody Rhodes is part of the creative, so he made the call on that. And they have him on the precipice of becoming a major superstar that they can build around. But they must go ahead, and if they do put the belt on him very soon, then they got to stick it on him for a long time.
It's got to be a Hollywood Hulk Hogan type run. Year plus, absolutely. And if they put the belt on him and he drops it too soon, it ends up a glass ceiling at that point.
Absolutely.
You've wasted your money on somebody that's honestly is probably one of the best talents microphone wise in the business right now.
Absolutely. He is that
arguably the best right now.
He is what you would call a prodigy, and we rarely see them in our business. Even The Rock, to an extent, he didn't come out with that when he was doing Flex Cabana, and then he became Rocky Maivia. It wasn't until he turned and he went ahead with that awesome Die Rocky Die promo that he cut that you really saw. Boom, there it is. There's the star potential right there.
Yeah, and Nation of Domination was where he kind of kicked the doors open,
Yeah, but as soon as he made that, like you said, with the Nation of Domination, he made that Die Rocky Die promo. That was just like that. His career has taken off from there. That's the one thing I would ask him if I was able to interview him. That's the one thing I ask him is if he didn't cut that promo, if he didn't make that move to the Nation of Domination, would he still be where he's at today? I'm probably going to say yes, because talent always rises to the top. But man, it made his whole career arc a lot sooner after that promo started. But getting back to MJF, he is, AEW is going to rise or fall with that guy. I'm going to tell you right now, and they need to go ahead and bring him along at the point where if you're going to go ahead and make John Moxley give up the belt, you're going to go ahead and slap it on his shoulder for a long time to come. You cannot split him up with Wardlow. He needs the bodyguard gimmick right now. They tried to do a little and hinted a little bit about that before in a few months. I thought that was the dumbest move, so I'm glad they backed off of that.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like you said, MJF, he's the best speaker in the business right now, and WWE is probably kicking themselves for not recognizing it sooner.
When I first heard MJF, it's like, man, this is the guy that the Miz wanted to be.
Pretty much, yes.
That's exactly who I drew a comparison to, was the Miz, and it's like this is the guy that he was supposed to be.
Absolutely. I just need him to get I would, if I was Vince McMahon or Tony Khan, I would tell him, just get do what you get, just a little bit better shape, because even the Roddy Piper, you saw how thin he was, especially in his early years. I mean, going back to even before I got into wrestling in the 70s, he was very thin, very, very slight of build, but he built himself. So by the time he got to the WWE or / WWF, he was believable as far as it's concerned, facing up against bigger guys like Hogan, et cetera, et cetera. So, I would suggest MJF that he gets just a little bit better shape. And if he does, the sky's the limit for that guy.
And hopefully, if we get lucky enough and he sees this, he might choose some shit our way.
That's up to him. I'm sure he's probably been told that or knows that or whatnot. But again, he health willing, he is the superstar for AEW going forward. I wouldn't turn him to a baby face at any point in time soon. But if he does turn, obviously it's going to be, should make it a big thing. But he is,
in my opinion, they should treat him the way that Hogan was treated in that regard. But
absolutely,
Hogan was a baby face for the longest time. Over a decade.
But there is also the possibility, since he is a heel, aka villain out there, that he would be treated like Ric Flair, that he's going to do 17 jobs. He's going to get the title 17 times, but he'll be known as the greatest, as far as what he's doing out there. And he's a good worker. He's not a great worker. That's in the ring. I've seen his stuff. He's pretty good. Then that's the thing. You either need to be great in the ring or great on the mic, and he's good enough on the. He reminds me of the most successful individuals out there, like an Austin, like a Rock, like whatnot. They were never considered at the top level of performers, but they were considered good workers, and they became good workers. But what they could do was really entertain and capture the audience, which is what you want to do.
Yeah. You always had your people like The Rock, Steve Austin, and then you had your Bret Harts, your Shawn Michaels. Guys that they made it happen. In the ring, they carried the matches.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not as high on Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels as some others. I do think they're up there in your top 10. But some of them, when just like Flair, just as Flair could go out and do the same things over and over, but still create that memorable match. It was what he did outside the ring that would go ahead and capture the audience. Yeah, I know with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, what they did in the ring was do a lot of great things that would create a lot of great matches. Outside the ring, it was hit and miss with them as far as what they could do. And that's why I think Rock and Steve Austin were just a little higher on my food chain as far as overall performance. Because for me, it's also important as a performer that you're able to go ahead and connect an audience via the communication part, as opposed to not just telling a story in the ring.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was speaking morely from like an in-ring talent.
Oh yeah.
Bret Hart was always somebody that's like, man, he was good, especially on the fly decisions.
Oh yeah, I mean, in his sleep, he could give you a 3.5 star match. Same thing with Flair. Same thing with Michaels, and that's the thing. I mean, and Michaels could bump like no tomorrow, and the thing that's the case. Yeah, I'm just saying. They always talked about how they're the best of all time. And I hear the best of all time when it comes to those guys, and I'm just like, it's not just the in ring and creating that excitement there. Mm-hmm. It's to me, it's also about how you're connecting an audience and the whole performance of that. I mean, Bret Hart really didn't connect an audience until he became a bad guy and started the Canada versus USA thing. That's when he really got the crowd connected to him in a way that was truly magnetic. And with Shawn Michaels, it was always touch and go because he can never just he's comfortable when he's with Triple H and doing the shtick with Degeneration X, but by himself, it's always been touch and go as well. I mean, you can't put him as far as a talker in the like the Rock, Ric Flair, or
he can't. It's not even close.
Yeah.
One thing with Bret Hart, it was so polarizing during the Canada versus US shtick that he had. Man, when they would go to Canada versus when they would be over the border in the US, it was so polarizing. The reaction they got, people bought into it.
That was amazing, and I think those days, I try not to go ahead and say, what, back in my day in the WWE Attitude Era, but the thing is, it was so magnifying, and if young men and women out there that want to go ahead and check out why it was so magnifying, I mean, they just need to go to YouTube or the WWE Network and understand why it's so magnifying, because they don't have that same kind of connection, or the fans do, to the stars today, because the stars are just not able to go ahead and I don't know if they're just, there's that missing element. And I've said it for a while now on my shows, is that the WWE is not truly a successful organization until or unless they have a marquee star. And right now, they don't have a marquee star that they can build around. AEW with MJF, they just might, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, like I can't say it any better. I
mean, tell me exactly. Do you see? I mean, whether you loved him or hate him, John Cena is probably the last magnifying individual that could get an audience one way or the other. Roman Reigns, there's some love him, that some hate him. He does get a crowd reaction, but there's a lot of other people that just don't care. I mean, some of them are happy now that he's finally turned heel and turned the bad guy. I know this is one of the things that you and I wanted to talk about, that he's lined with Paul Heyman. But the thing is, with him, it's just the point where, like, okay, he resisted so long, now I don't care. And the storyline is now that he's just not, if there's anybody in WWE that can move the numbers, I guess it's him. Yeah. But again, they just really, for years since the peak of John Cena, have not had that one individual that they can market their company around, as much as they tried with Roman Reigns. And you've seen the results. In my opinion, they're about 3 to 4 years too late on turning Roman Reigns heel. He should have been turned heel years ago. Absolutely, because they've tried to push him down our throats, and it just didn't work. It just hasn't been effective. And had they done that and made him a heel at that point in time, I think it could have garnered a lot of interest. I think it could have garnered a huge amount of interest, but he just didn't want to buy in on it. I think it was more him than the company as saying that's the case. I look at Roman Reigns and I don't say, I don't see a face. I see a heel just by his look. Yeah. But I know he's a nice guy in real life. I know from all I've seen in interviews and all I've heard, backstage, I heard he's a terrific person to deal with. And I wish him much success, especially after all the heroic things that he's had to go through with his health and whatnot. So I wish him all the best. But to see his character, if you really want to go ahead and promote something, you can only capture lightning in a bottle so many times. Yeah. And they were very fortunate to do that on 2 occasions, with Hulk Hogan and then Steve Austin. And then with The Rock on top of that. And then John Cena was, I wouldn't want to say full lightning in a bottle, but he was kind of like a good storm in the rain, so to speak. But yeah, right now they're trying to develop Drew McIntyre. It's just not doing it. Again, I think they were a little too late on him too. I mean, not by Roman Reigns, but he could have been a monster heel if when he came back, they would have just,
He's been there before. If they would have dropped the title on him, or at least like the Intercontinental or the US, he could have been a lot bigger than he is now.
But it's also, you have to do things too in your own right. With the lightning in the bottle scenario, I mean, it wasn't the WWE per se 100%. It was also Steve Austin dropping that 316 line, saying those things and doing those things right around that time, coming up with the Stone Cold persona, because he was the ringmaster and wasn't going anywhere. So let's put that out there as well. Drew McIntyre, 3MB and all that, he wasn't going anywhere either. But it's also sometimes up to just as much as the company to try and do, but it's also sometimes up to the wrestler to go ahead and stand out in some way. And I just don't see Drew McIntyre in his promos or anything like that. They're good. He's good in the ring. He's in great shape. But good doesn't sell it. It's just got to be something that clicks, and you don't know what's going to click. You can try and force it, but it's not. It's got to be organic, and there's nothing organic right now as far as the star is concerned, unless it's AEW with MJF. But I'm not 100% sold on that because I don't have enough faith right now that they're going to go ahead and follow what you and I are talking about.
Yeah, the last organic thing in WWE that I'm pretty sure I could say this. Probably Daniel Bryan's original run.
Yes, and that
that's the most organic thing I can remember about WWE.
But the problem is whether they didn't like it, the fact that his size, he's not the biggest guy in the world. They just weren't willing to go all in on him. And that's the problem. That's part of the problem. When you have something organic that works like that, you have to go and buy in and go all in as a company, and keep it that way and ride it out for as long as you can. And they chose not to do that. Again, I think size was a factor with him, and it's a shame because he's a tremendous worker in the ring. He provides exciting matches, and I thought there was a great future there. But now he's just a very good wrestler instead of something that could have been even more.
Now, looking at some of the new live shows, what's your take on how they're running their new live shows? Where are they selling seats with screens?
Well, it's not selling seats per se. That's part of the fan universe. You got to go and fill out the thing on WWE.com, and similar to what the NBA does with Michelob Ultra and whatnot. But as far as their Thunderdome, that's based out of the Orlando Arena, Amway Arena and whatnot. I like it as a better step in the right direction. Doing things from the Performance Center kind of, had a worn out feel after a little while, but it's a step in the right direction under the circumstances. I mean, people can go ahead and criticize WWE all you want as far as them actually continuing during this pandemic, but at this point in time, now that all these other sports leagues are doing it, they might as well go ahead and do it. And I think they're trying to do what they can under the best circumstances possible. It's a good look as best you can. And I'm more acceptable to that, but they got to get rid of the canned crowd noise. Absolutely got to get rid of it. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it at all. I mean, I made this on my Lakers Fast Break basketball show about how I just was just so angry that during the preseason and the bubble games when they were adding crowd noise, and I just said, you got to get rid of it. It just sounds awful. The 2K, they were using NBA 2K crowd noise in there, and it was just like awful, just absolutely awful.
Yeah, I guess they have a couple kinks iron out there too as far as that goes, because there's a lot of people putting certain things up on the screens that are getting through the cracks.
Absolutely.
Some unfortunate, some kind of cracked me up a little bit. I know somebody had a picture of Chris Benoit on, which I think they should still keep them in their history books, but that's just my opinion from an avid Chris Benoit fan.
Well, especially, and I understand he was one of the greatest in-ring performers ever. I get that. I've saw his work over the years as Wild Pegasus, as Chris Benoit, WCW and WWE, whatnot, but it's hard, what he did, and if you're running WWE in a 2020 timeframe, a cancel culture now, that would take heavy criticism, absolutely heavy criticism, could get boycotts, could get canceled, could mass social media, where if you did something like that, and that's hard. It's hard to recognize someone that did something so heinous
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, he could have been very troubled. Most likely, if you watched all the specials, the Dark Side of the Ring and some of the other stuff that's been out
Yep.
there on him, you realize that he may have not been in his own right mind. And there's very great possibility that that was the case. So I don't want to go ahead and say, you know what, I disagree with WWE in that sense, because if I'm running the company, I probably make the call not to do it either, just because you can't in our current cancel culture because of someone who committed such a heinous crime.
Yeah. Now, something interesting relating to him, his son supposedly in talks with AEW, which that's going to be hard for him.
I would make sure he has a different ring name. I would not. That wouldn't be the first thing I'd say.
Just because of his name, it's going to be a very, very hard go for him. I know he's friends with Chris Jericho, a couple of the other guys there that are in AEW currently.
Well, he deserves the chance. He deserves the opportunity. If that's what he wants to do to fulfill his life, absolutely. And now that sports entertainment is, for lack of a better term, safer, especially when it concerns drug use and steroids and of course the headshots, which we now know were very damaging in many ways to many wrestlers. I mean, I don't think we should preclude him from that and give him every opportunity to succeed. I just think for his own sanity and clarity that he might want to go ahead and under a different name. But if he wants to go ahead and try to do something under his own name, by all means, give him every opportunity. But there's going to be a lot to come with it. That if you're going to go out there as first name Larry or
David, if I'm not mistaken.
David, yeah, that's right, David Benoit. If he's going to go out there as David Benoit, he knows just by having that last name, he is going to be subject to a lot of other stuff outside of that, and people will be rooting against him just because of that name.
And not even that, his father set a very high bar to follow as far as somebody coming in and performing just in that right. I know he's been training up in Canada under Lance Storm, who, if you remember, was very close with Chris Benoit back in the day.
Absolutely. And I know he's had more time to work with him because Lance Storm just got cut as a producer during the pandemic. So I feel bad for him because he moved, he closed his school, he moved to Florida, and then they decided they didn't need him anymore, which doesn't sound, well, it sounds like the WWE because they've done that stuff before. So
yeah, they found a good excuse for it this time.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, that's you're taking the Benoit name in the ring. You know what you're dealing. You've got to know what you're getting into, and I'm assuming he would. I'm assuming he does.
Has enough people around him that would be able to tell him that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on, as far as independent wrestling goes, do you follow much independent wrestling at all?
Here and there, some of the Japanese wrestling, sometimes a little bit of Shikara, sometimes a little bit of Ring of Honor, sometimes, but Impact. I know that they're getting a little bit more now with some of the WWE wrestlers, and that's what happens. WWE lets go a lot of wrestlers. They start flooding the independent promotions like TNA, NWA, Ring of Honor, etc., etc. But it's hard, I'm going to be honest with you, to watch them now in this time frame, because I think the talent pool is quite considerably less than previous decades, I should say, even from last decade or the decade before, especially when you had like the Bryan Danielsons, the Samoa Joes, you had Kevin Owens, you had so many different wrestlers that we now know today. Now, mind you, there are probably wrestlers that we will know tomorrow that are in the independent scene today, but they just don't stand out at this point in time, or at least whatever they're doing is not standing out at this point in time, comparatively to what we were seeing 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago in these regional areas.
Any independent wrestlers that you personally feel you would like to see move up to a brand such as AEW or WWE?
That is a good question. I think if I'm going to go ahead and name one, the one sticks out. There's one name, one major name that sticks out, and she's very familiar with everybody out there, and that's Tessa Blanchard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're just really, after that, it's kind of hard. You're kind of trying to weed out. Oh, maybe Jay Lethal. He's a veteran. He's pretty good. And or there's like the Briscoe brothers. Oh, they're really good. They're good, but they've been there, in Ring of Honor so long. Could they actually make an impact somewhere else? So it's just harder to find. You have to weed through to find talent. So you're hoping to find another MJF in the diamonds and the rough type deals, and it's hard.
Yeah.
But Tessa Blanchard would probably be the one name I would look at if you're not looking at Japan at this point. Because you go to Japan, you can always find a star there.
Yeah. No, she would sell. Absolutely.
But
no. I'm going to probably agree. I would like to see the Briscoes be able to come work with the Young Bucks again, because that was some of their old matches. They were really good.
But that's one of the complaints I have about AEW is you have Kenny Omega, which had the quote unquote 7-star match, which I've seen, which was really good, but it's not my all-time favorite match. But he's had some outstanding matches with Okada and some others. Yeah. You've had the Young Bucks, who had some great matches back in the day. Now, mind you, it's in the style that makes Jim Cornette cringe, but it's still a very fun, athletic, high-impact style. You have so many great tag teams in AEW that have performed well outside of AEW. But the problem is, I don't see these great 4- and 5-star matches since they've come to AEW. I can't remember, when Kenny Omega has had just a great match. They've had okay matches.
I know Kenny Omega's kind of on the back burner.
Yeah.
He was one of the vice presidents of operations there, so I know Kenny Omega was definitely trying to put people over. I don't know how much you keep up with his social media accounts, but he's definitely teasing some definite old school action.
Well, the problem is, did he put too many people over? And same thing with, okay, because there's a point where you put so many people over, you lose your status amongst the fans' eyes. And I think it would only take another great match from him that he could pull out, so that it would regarner a lot of interest.
You followed Kenny Omega in New Japan, yeah?
Mm-hmm. That's, okay. Like I said, that's where it starts.
From what I gather, he's bringing his cleaner persona back, which is going to be absolute gold.
Okay, well, that's obviously was very successful for him. Again, his matches with Okada are something very, very good. I highly recommend. But here, it goes back to AEW has had some pretty good matches. But most of them have been by Cody and John Moxley. I don't see those great matches that, like I said, with Hangman Page, with Kenny Omega, with the Young Bucks, that I was seeing when they were outside, whether it's with PWG or whether it's with, in Japan or wherever. They were having these tremendous matches. And then they come to AEW, and whether it's the fact that they're running behind the scenes operations, which most of them are, that may be taking precedent, which is fine. You're trying to build your company going there, but you also want to make sure you keep your own name so that the fans keep interested in what you're doing. And that, to me, is hopefully going to be something that they need to focus on now that they're established, now that they've got numbers, now that they got people watching, that they can go ahead and remind fans why they're there in the first place.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was just to try and avoid any backlash, saying that, well, they're running the show, they're putting themselves over. I think a lot of that was I think the reason was because of that.
But sometimes you do need to put yourself over, because if it gets you, in the end, it's about putting the people in the seats, getting them to spend the money, and getting them to watch your show. And if you put people over each and every time out, you're not getting people to watch the show. They did a smart thing with Cody. He lost to MJF. He put MJF over, but immediately got himself the belt and won time in, time out to go ahead and reestablish himself as a top star in AEW. Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, that beer drinking to milk drinking type deal scenario, it works to an
Yeah.
extent, but it's starting to play itself out. So they need to go ahead going forward, whether they face off against each other or break up or do
I know.
something as far as that
I
they
know.
got to go ahead and do something with their characters. Go ahead.
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
I know. Hangman Page just turned heel.
Yeah,
That.
I just but
But, yeah.
but he's been a pseudo heel now for months. This is something
Yeah.
that's not a stretch for him.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming at some point in time those two are going to face off, Kenny Omega and but it's got to mean something. It's got to work something, and that's they still don't have the best array of talent yet. I think there's some stars there like Brian Cage, obviously MJF we talked about.
Yeah.
There's a couple other stars. I'm not a huge fan of Orange Cassidy. I'm going to tell you right now. I think the hands in the pockets type deal. Okay, that works only for me for so long. But Chris Jericho's trying hard to put him over, so I give him credit for that. It's funny because I was thinking the other day, I'm hearing him always talk about how back in the day that Kevin Nash held him down and all that and boys in WCW. And it's funny, ironic, 20 years later, he has become the Kevin Nash of AEW, trying to manipulate things and from his own way, even though he can't do a lot of things that he once did. So I give him credit for that, for understanding the landscape of where he's at and still being able to be on top because of it.
Yeah. And I think, man, the character he played going into AEW, he couldn't have did it any better.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think their women's division, they need to go ahead and, whether or not they get Tessa Blanchard, they need to provide a lot more emphasis on that because I think it's not where it needs to be. You compare it to the WWE, which has put so much emphasis on their women and has made it such an integral part of the WWE as once not too long ago, it was just a side thing and it wasn't very important. And now it's very integral to part of WWE and sometimes gets the best ratings. And for my money, the best wrestler this year is Asuka. She has the best resume this year and the best career. She's right now one of the best workers on the planet and has had the best matches overall this year.
Yeah.
So I would say, man or woman, she's my number one pick. I said that on my show a couple weeks ago, and I see the Charlotte Flairs, I see the Rhea Ripleys, I see the Baileys and the Sasha Banks. Their dynamic, as far as that's concerned, being probably the best storyline that's going on right now in WWE. I mean, the women's division is now proving in 2020 that could be something that you can generate money, generate interest, generate attendance. Doesn't have to be a sideshow. Doesn't have to be something you sprinkle in once every 3 hours. Doesn't have to be something that you're using and selling, sex appeal about like you have in the past. It can be something that you can do legitimately and show off legitimately and can garner a lot of success from it. AEW needs to follow that roadmap that the WWE has now set out, and they need to go ahead and build something there because they've done a pretty good job, obviously, with what they had for the men's side, but they haven't done very much for the women's side. The women's side at least seems very inconsequential at this point in time in the AEW product.
One person AEW let go that I was kind of bummed out to see them let go was Bea Priestley.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a lot of her independent stuff and she was good. And touching on her, another person I'd love to see in a better position is Will Ospreay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Will Ospreay is considered by many one of the best workers on the planet. He's had tremendous matches. He has got a big time attitude, as you and I have seen it, but he's also got just an outstanding skill, and you got to get him now because his injuries are going to catch up with him. His style is going to catch up with him.
Have you seen the matches between him and Ricochet?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Incredible.
It is. I can understand what Jim Cornette says about it being too coordinated at times, but for me, yes, even though it's kind of in that realm, it's still so beautiful to watch as far as those two, the way they perform together.
those two together made it look so organic.
Yes, and don't get me started on Ricochet in WWE. That depresses me. Yeah, I won't even talk about that right now.
Rumor Hill Matt has it he might be on his way out.
I would be too. I'd be depressed. You know you're so athletic. You've got so much to give. You could be so exciting for this WWE product, and you're relegated to the main event or being jobbed out in 2 minutes. It's just absolutely ridiculous that they have.
The first thing that bothered me about Ricochet when he debuted was his entrance music. I hate it.
I mean, that's usually a kiss of death right there for you. But, I mean, he was tremendous in NXT. I thought they were really going to do something with him, but unfortunately, it's not the case. That's going to be the WWE's loss. And Ricochet is going to be one of those few ex-WWE stars, if that's the case, that's going to be a prized individual somewhere else. He's going to go back and become a top star either in Japan, independent scene, could become a star in Mexico, or, dare I say it, a top contender for AEW.
He has ties there.
Yeah, there you go.
There's a lot of underutilized. I mean, when you have a roster that's that large, you're going to have underutilized talent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll say a couple wrestlers. I'll say a couple wrestlers. We'll both have different opinions, but you're right. When you have the WB and their policy of even Steven booking, a lot that really irritates a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of that. You're going to have somebody that's okay. I'm finally going to give you the push, and it doesn't go as well as you planned because you've been booking him this way for so long. And it's like, okay, your turn, you're up, take a number, your turn, you're up. And it's just like, okay, you want us to go ahead and get behind him. I can't do that.
I mean, you have your Rusevs, even John Moxley. It's like, I mean, they put belts around him, but they murdered him.
Yeah.
And he's not that great in the ring.
No,
and could he tell a good story?
Yeah, he's good enough in the ring, and he obviously is pretty good on the mic, as we've seen, and he's a good fit as your champion. Now the thing is, do you want to take the belt off him so soon? But also, do you want MJF to do the job? And that's the problem. If MJF does the job, I see a lot of shine coming on often, and that's the problem. I'd say you go with the future now. Because you've already made the bed, might as well go ahead and lie in it. You made the bed, so you got to go ahead and do it. I would give him the title and have that long streak run right now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna go through with it, you got to it's got to be a Hulk Hogan-esque type run. You got to give it for a long time. You got to make most of his matches look effortless.
Absolutely, you got to create a heel persona. Like
the problem is who are you going to bury in the process?
Well, again, it comes to the point where he needs to be given that Ric Flair run. Not necessarily the Hulk Hogan run, but the Ric Flair run where Ric Flair a couple times did have it over a year. And he did travel around the world with it and made the name of Ric Flair what it is. But, who you're going to bury? I mean, I wouldn't bury Brian Cage, who I like a lot. I really don't think they need Taz to talk for him, but, be that as it may, I think Brian Cage is someone that you got to keep near the top. I think what's his name? The TNT champion, off the top of my head. The head of the Dark Order.
Yeah.
Brody Lee. Yeah, he is someone that I'm sorry, it doesn't do it for me. He's someone you could go ahead and but the thing is, how much if you bury him, the Dark Order becomes a joke, even though some people it's a joke already.
And I liked Brody Lee in WWE. That persona I felt fit his look, fit what he did. Somebody that I'm thrilled to see as a champion is Sheeta, is the AEW Women's Champion. I think she's a phenomenal wrestler.
But the problem is she doesn't have much to go off of. She doesn't have many outlets for contenders. And that's the problem when you run into a lack of depth and a lack of attention based on the women in AEW, is that you have this champion who, like you said, you appreciate, and she just does not have that list of contenders that inspires people to go ahead. I got to watch that. I mean, it's a matter of you need to build, and the WWE. Well, sometimes we get mad when they force things down our throats, but they started really pushing the women's division in 2016, 2017, 2018 to the point where they were main events on WrestleMania. They were having their own all women's pay-per-view. They did it at the point where people started to really care what was going on with that division. And you have to do that with AEW. And right now they're not. Because look at the time frames look at when the AEW women's division is being showcased during the course of Dynamite. Look at them when they're being showcased mostly on AEW Dark, and that tells you right there what they're thinking about. Because if they had a different mindset, or if they'd started from the beginning, they should have given the women a more even playing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. 100%. Another one of my favorite, and I think it's most a lot of people that watch AEW's favorite, Darby Allin has become one of my personal favorites in there. A very very early Hardy Boys Day-esque type persona.
Mm-hmm.
I like him.
He's one of these new bloods, so to speak. I can't believe I'm using that phrase, but I think there's, just off the top of my head, there's no other way to describe it. The new blood that you do want to eventually market him, but he needs a slow build. He needs to be possibly that individual, maybe that AEW can get behind, that might beat an MJF maybe a year and a half down the line. That people would believe. The thing is, you got to go ahead and build out slowly. You got to protect him like you did MJF, and that's the thing. Because if you don't, then you're just making him just another guy, and that's the problem. You need to protect these young assets that you have for down the road. I mean, you have Jericho now. That's great. He's going to help your company get name status for the now. You have Cody, who's still young enough, can be a now and later on down the line. John Moxley, same thing. The Young Bucks, all that. But you also have to have somebody like a Darby Allin, who you created yourself, who you grew yourself as your own superstar, because virtually no one knew where he came from or what his background was.
Kip Sabian's another one,
Yeah. So, I mean,
very talented wrestler. He's not too bad on the mic either.
Absolutely. So you got to build these wrestlers and protect them. If you don't want to push them to the moon, you still have to protect them and put them in spots that will start to get the fans like you interested in them. But there are careful ways of doing that, to put them on spots on the card where they will, when they're ready to go to that next level, they'll be there and the fans will go with them. But that's the thing. If you put them in meaningless feuds, if you put them in feuds where it's even Steven, where they lose, they win, they lose, then you're only defeating the purpose right there for their future and your own.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and push through to the next topic. We'll call that one a wrap for now. Your opinion on where the movie and TV industry is going to be in about a year or two?
Well, it all depends on where we're at with coronavirus. How much of an impact will that play out 12, 18 months from now? Filming and production have taken place in various parts of the world, whether it's the U.S., whether it's New Zealand, Australia, Europe. We just saw, as you already know, Robert Pattinson unfortunately got COVID and the Batman was shut down, but hopefully he'll be okay. And in 2-3 weeks, they can get that back up and running again. Then it's all dependent on where coronavirus sits. If coronavirus is still a major issue 12 to 18 months down the line, then you're going to see continued staggered rollout of the entertainment industry. But I'm hopeful that we'll have some way that we can better control this pandemic, and we can go ahead and get back to some normalcy when it comes to our entertainment and how and how they can go ahead and produce. Because going forward, we now have different ideals on how we can go ahead and view our entertainment. That's the one thing our pandemic has done, is now made streaming extremely viable. We're seeing it today as you and I speak with the advent of Mulan bypassing the theaters here in North America, or at least in the US, and going straight to a $30 Disney Plus format. So this is a grand experiment going on right now before our very eyes. And if it does well, who's to say that they won't do it in the future with some other projects down the line, or HBO Max might not, might do it, or Peacock might do it because they own they're Universal. So you might see these things down the line. And because people going forward, you cannot tell me that 100% of the people are going to be just willing to go back next year in 2021 and all of them go back to the theaters. There's always going to be people that are apprehensive now because of what's happened and taken place in the pandemic. And there's a lot of people now that are just satisfied to go ahead and watch it on their 60-inch TV, their flat screens, because flat screens have gotten so much cheaper. I mean, come Black Friday, there should be some 50 and 60-inch TVs under $500 really easily. So they're able to go ahead and say, you know what, I'll just go ahead and watch the latest movies at home. And that's changed the whole dynamic of things as well going forward. We may never see, I'm sure we will, but we may never see a film that approaches the dollar amount that Avengers Endgame had, because of the fact that there may not be as many people going to the theaters going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it was in January, 55-inch flat screen, $350.
There you go. Absolutely. I mean, it's
good.
Yeah, I mean, 4K, 1080 for goodness sakes, is great for a lot of people. It's good for me. I mean, people ask me, "Are you going to get a 4K?" Because I have like a 10-year-old 60-inch flat screen. I'm like, it's good, works for me. Can I see it? I'm good. I don't. Maybe when these new generation consoles come out, maybe I'll think about going 4K or 8K or whatever it is that they can go ahead up to now these days. But my gosh, I'm good for now if I can see what's going on. Most of the broadcast networks still only go ahead and produce in 1080. They don't upscale to 4K yet. So why go?
Even on Facebook, when we do Facebook Lives, they're broadcasting in 720 yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you see me? Can you see the fact that I have Lakers? Can you see my Mass Effect behind me? If you can, for 99% of the people out there, you're good.
Yeah.
Can I see the nice design that you got back behind you right there? There you go. Absolutely. Can I see the guitars? There you go. You're good. So
yeah, that's all you really need, But going back to the movies, should the virus end up lasting longer than a lot of people are thinking? Do you think there's going to be any point where there's just a big empty gap where there's nothing released?
No, they'll always try to fill it. And the thing is, it may not be filled in the way people had thought of traditionally. Because we even saw it now. I mean, they were still Netflix and streaming services were still trying to fill the gap with some type of content, whether it was popcorn movies, whether it was dramas, whether it was something that they could go ahead and throw. They were creating the gaps. Box office wise to theaters, that's a different story. We're going to still see gaps for the foreseeable future until this thing is nipped in the bud. Once this thing is nipped in the bud to an extent that people are going out in, let's say, 50 to 60% of what we once saw going to the theaters, then you're going to see the floodgates open, and you and I are going to see all those movies that were delayed in 2020 that didn't get put on streaming. They're going to be brought out, like every other week, and there's going to be a problem where everything's going to catch up. But again, there's also the production that that was missed earlier this year because of all the stuff that's going on with COVID. There's going to be again a gap, so they have to recognize that there's going to have to be a balance on the calendar at some point in time, because there will be an audience that goes back to theaters. It just won't be as large as it once was, at least for the foreseeable future. But there still will be a reason and an impetus, as we're seeing now with Tenet and Mulan overseas. I mean, there are theater chains that are open across the globe, and enough to the point where Tenet and Mulan are making enough money to say, you know what, it was worth the investment. But are they going to be making the $1 billion that both were perceived to make at the box office? When all is said and done, I'm not going to expect it. I don't think so. But there's still $200 to $300, $400 million that could possibly be on the table for both those movies. So that they were very reluctant to go streaming all around the world, and that's probably the reason why right there.
Okay, so you don't think we're going to be left with a big giant hole where there's no TV or movies?
If not, somebody's going to capitalize it. I mean, let's say there's a gap January to March next year. Okay, as far as movies come to the box office. Guess what fills it up? Netflix. Netflix will eat that stuff up. Netflix has so many projects going in. It's spending so much cash and so much money on content and buying stuff that they aren't even producing, that they'll fill that gap, because that's why they're number one. If they don't, Amazon will. If they don't, HBO Max. If they don't, Peacock will. If they don't, Disney Plus will. And especially now that some of these productions are beginning to come up, now you're going to go ahead and start seeing things like at the end of October, you're going to see The Mandalorian and you're going to see, hopefully at some point in time soon, you're going to see the Winter Soldier and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you're going to see all these other projects come on staggered, on streaming, that will take the place of any gaps in the box office. So you may see a gap in the movies, at least on the front part of 2021, but it will be more than made up by streaming services.
All right. Well, I think that answered probably most of the questions I've heard people asking relating to that. So
those are great questions.
On that note, Gerald, it's been great having you. I was thrilled to have you back on here. Definitely go check Gerald's website out, popculturecosmos.com. And I believe you're on Podbean?
Well, I'm actually all over. Just type in Pop Culture Cosmos. If you're not seeing it down below, just Pop Culture Cosmos, wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I had to list out today because a network wanted me, a geek network was interested in the show, and they wanted me to list out all the places I'm on. I lost track. So with all the podcast apps out of there, Bullhorn, whatever you got on your phone to play podcasts, or whatever you got out there to play podcasts, just look for Pop Culture Cosmos. We're out there. We're out twice a week. Every Monday and Friday, we drop new shows that cover the latest news and interests, and basically the news and trends in pop culture. We also provide extra shows. If you come to our social media, like Facebook, for instance, where we're always doing videos. This weekend, I'm going to try to play some video games and do some playthroughs there. You also see every Monday and Tuesday, I try to do Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars RPG playthroughs with a lot of people as well online. You'll get to see that on streaming. I also do the Lakers Fast Break each and every night with some great guests, including Rafael Barlow of NBA Draft Junkies, doing playoff coverage each and every night. I'm looking to get my Inside Sports Fantasy Football show back again with Chris Ardieri and get that back going, because football is right around the corner. So I try to keep my plate full, man. I'm trying to keep it full.
Hey, it sounds like it. But yeah, like I said, guys, I appreciate you all watching. Check out Gerald's site, popculturecosmos.com. Pop him into Google, Bing, whatever you're using to search the interwebs. And thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Try again.